This story about Joe Kent, the counterterrorism official that resigned from the Trump administration in his opposition to the Iran war just now, it's getting more and more wild because, first of all, as soon as he resigns, he's suddenly jumping on shows like Tucker Carlson, literally immediately. And now it's being reported that actually he may well have been under investigation for leaking information. There's been speculation around how people like Candace Owens and Tucker were getting some of their insider information and who would be leaking it to them. And there's been a bunch of different sources now saying that he is under FBI investigation for leaking classified information. And now there's speculation that maybe part of the reason for his resignation and getting ahead of the curve, the media curve, by going on to Tucker and other shows is because this was already happening. This is pretty wild stuff. I want to talk to you about the investigation and what's been said. But before that, let's just see what happened immediately in the aftermath, because he decides to go on Tucker's show, and let's see what happened there, because frankly, it was just absurd. I'll show you what he said on the Tucker show in a moment, some of the things he said, which really I found pretty alarming, because it kind of indicated that he is someone that's very ideological, seems to be leaning into conspiracy theories, irrational thinking. And it's like, well, this guy has had a position within the administration. Now, by the way, from what I understand, actually wasn't that senior in terms of decision-making or anything like that. It's more about analysis, counter-terror analysis. But still, it's part of the regime. So watch this clip. Tucker and Joe Kent spreading the false claim that Israel forced Trump to strike Iran. Their lies got so unhinged that they aired clips of the Trump administration officials that they were already proven to be taken out of context in order to prove that President Trump cannot think for himself, something which I think we all know is not the case. In reality, Trump has long said that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, and he ordered strikes on that premise.
Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation. How did you reach that conclusion?
I think this is key. I mean, this would be more challenging to explain had the Secretary of State, the President, and the Speaker of the House not come out and said that we conducted this attack at this time because the Israelis were about to do so. So that takes away the argument that there was an imminent threat, as in Iran was planning to attack us immediately. That just simply did not exist.
May I ask you to pause? Sure. And so...
Okay, so let's first just back up for a second. I don't think anyone was saying that Iran was about to attack literally the next day with a nuclear weapon. The point is that there was strong evidence that from people in the Senate, and I'll show you clips of those later, and senior officials have all confirmed they were very rapidly trying to rebuild their nuclear program. And the point was this: they clearly had their eyes and their sights set on America as well as Israel. And Iran was clearly in a weak, vulnerable spot, particularly in the aftermath of the 12-day war and everything Israel had achieved to date. And Trump clearly concluded, now is the chance to do it, because otherwise they're going to rapidly try and do this again. And we can't keep having this tit-for-tat thing that's happening, because who's to say where things will go there with the regime? So we have to take this moment, seize this opportunity. If not now, when? Look at this. This is President Trump. To say that he was forced into this recently. This is President Trump back in 2015.
Day I came down the escalator in 2015, I said...
Sorry, he's quoting what he said back in 2015.
Day I came down the escalator in 2015, I said, quote, I will stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons, and all I'm doing is keeping my promise. Think of that. That was in 2015. I said it. It was a threat then and a much bigger threat now, but no longer a threat, not for a long time anyway.
In fact, more than that, he's been sounding the alarm on Iran for decades, going back to basically the start of the revolution. Now, where it gets even more disturbing is Kent clearly was leaning into all the kind of crazed conspiracies that Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson would say. So much so that we even had Iranian regime state media 4 times in the space of an hour sharing this interview on their platform. It tells you everything you need to know. Joe Kent suggests that Israel may be behind Charlie Kirk's killing. He was literally part of the intel community, as open source intel are pointing out. If he knew something and wanted to whistleblow, he could have. Turns out he's just a Candace Owens 2.0.
And then, Charlie Kirk is killed publicly in a very horrific way, and we're not really even allowed to look into that at all. And Charlie Kirk was one of President Trump's closest advisors, and he also advocated heavily against a war with Iran. He was in the Oval Office in the lead up to the 12-day war. I wasn't particularly close with Charlie. He was very gracious to me when I was running for Congress, very, very supportive. So we knew each other. And the last time I saw Charlie Kirk on this earth was in June in the West Wing, in the stairway. And I said hi to him, and he looked me in the eye, and he said very loudly, and it's a small, you've been in the West Wing, it's small, it's a tight space. And he said, "Joe, stop us from getting into a war with Iran," very loudly.
He was single-minded.
And he walked off, and he went, I believe, into the Oval. So when one of President Trump's closest advisors, who is...
Now, by the way, that's true. Charlie was against the war. That doesn't prove that Israel did something to Charlie. And also, once Israel and America did go to war against Iran, Charlie supported it. He said, "I trust the president."
Vocally advocating for us to not go to war with Iran and for us to rethink at least our relationship with the Israelis. And then he's suddenly publicly assassinated, and we're not allowed to ask any questions about that.
I mean, it's sick. It's sick what he's
Data
doing.
point. It's a data point that we need to look into.
What do you mean
I mean,
when you say we're not allowed to ask any questions about that?
We've been told that this individual, Robinson, is a lone gunman, and maybe he is. But the investigation that I was a part of, the National Counterterrorism Center was a part of, we were stopped from continuing to investigate. And the FBI will say that they stopped that because they wanted to turn everything over to the Utah state authorities. Everything's going to trial. It's very, very sensitive. But there was still a lot for us to look into that I can't really get into. But there was still linkage for us to investigate that we needed to run down. And I'm not making any conclusions. I'm not saying
No, I don't think you are.
because of this happened. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying there's unanswered questions. We know the pressure because of the text messages that have been made public that Charlie was under a lot of pressure from a lot of pro-Israel donors. And again, we know Charlie was advocating to President Trump against this war with Iran.
I mean, it's pretty sick, this level of delusion and pushing these conspiracy theories and connecting these dots that just aren't there. Charlie was having some shifting views. Okay, you have zero evidence that would implicate Israel in that. At the same time that Charlie was advocating against the war with Iran, he was also writing to Netanyahu saying, "It is one of my great loves to advocate for Israel." But what it sounds like, according to Joe Kent, he was turning on Israel. He said, "Here's what I think you need to do to try and improve your PR." The day before his assassination, he's having a phone call with Rabbi Pesach Wolicki and Josh Hammer, planning how best to answer the accusations against Israel and the Jews, tirelessly defending that on campus. Were his views shifting? I'm sure they were. I think Charlie, one of his traits was that he was a real coalition builder and trying to hold the coalition together, and so was sympathetic and sensitive to various different elements, and may well have been having shifting views. But the evidence, A, that he was now completely done with Israel, maybe he's frustrated with certain things. I think to say that with certainty is absurd. And also, of course, then bring it back to Israel, when there is no evidence for that whatsoever. You're just finding two correlations, but that does not equal causation. Doing that, and someone in that kind of position that he was in, I think that is so, so disturbing. Just to show you the extent of his seemingly irrational thinking, is he said, "Why do I know that Iran doesn't want a nuclear weapon? Because it said it doesn't want a nuclear weapon."
Was Iran on the verge of getting a nuclear weapon?
No, they weren't, 3 weeks ago when this started, and they weren't in June either. I mean, the Iranians have had a religious ruling, a fatwa, against actually developing a nuclear weapon since 2004. That's been in place since 2004. That's available in the public sphere. But then also we had no intelligence to indicate that fatwa was being disobeyed or it was on the cusp of being lifted. The Iranian strategy, it's actually pretty pragmatic. The Iranians are obviously aware of what's taking place in their region, and their strategy was to not completely abandon their nuclear program because they saw what happened to Muammar Gaddafi in Libya when he said, hey, I've got no more nukes. I'll do what you say. I'll give up my nukes.
And we gave him the Nobel Peace Prize?
Yeah, we regime changed him, and he was executed by his own people in the most horrific way.
Sodomized by a bayonet. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the lesson I think that the entire region took from that when Hillary Clinton.
Unfortunately,
it's just unbelievable. It's unbelievable. We literally had Steve Witkoff saying that the Iranian ministers that he was speaking to days before the Iran war began were taunting him that they're close to getting nuclear weapons. The notion that you can just take what they say at face value is the highest form of stupidity. That's Neville Chamberlain logic. And more than that, what's interesting is that it seems like from prior tweets and statements, Kent used to warn against all this stuff literally months ago about the risk of a nuclear Iran. And yet, nope, now suddenly everything has changed. One has to wonder why. Why? Well, it looks like apparently this could be the reason. Have a watch.
I'm going to go. Sources are saying that Joe Kent, the former director of the United States National Counterterror Center, this is from Semaphore, he just resigned. He's now under FBI investigation for allegedly leaking classified information. And the investigation predates his departure. Congressman, your reaction to that tonight? Wow.
Well, there's a lot there, and I think that we need to let this investigation play out, but we shouldn't tolerate any leakers in the administration, particularly regarding classified national security interests and information. So we'll let this play out and see where it goes, but if he was leaking, he ought to be held accountable just like anybody else would be.
Now, 5 minutes ago, he seemed to think that Iran was a big threat, and then suddenly that threat went away. It was very odd. Congressman, thank you very much. Great.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Megyn Kelly. That we think, she tries to pretend that these changes in her opinions are big principled stances. It's just expediency. For more views, she thinks that's the way the tide is turning. Got to pound it to the groypers. That's the way I'm going to get views, hits, and monetization. It sounds like Joe Kent's doing a similar kind of thing. He's seeing the way that, he's under investigation. Maybe he thinks the gig is up. I'm just speculating. And therefore, that's what's motivating his sudden grand shift here. And his sudden pushing of all these bizarre conspiracies. I mean, it's pretty disturbed stuff, to be honest, if that's what's going on. Because how else can we explain this irrational thinking? As the scoop is explained by Laura Loomer, YL source tells me Joe Kent resigned once he got word that he was going to be under investigation for leaking classified information. It's now been reported Joe Kent is under FBI investigation for allegedly leaking classified information. As I reported last year, Joe Kent was caught leaking President Trump's private schedule and meetings to Tucker Carlson and was told by senior White House advisors if he got caught leaking again, he'd be fired. It appears Joe Kent's interview with Tucker is nothing more than a premeditated performance to play the victim card and cry retaliation because Kent knew the truth about his investigation would come out. The interviews this week is his way of getting ahead of the news breaking. As I said yesterday, Kent sounds like someone who was about to be fired and resigned before they were fired. Tulsi Gabbard let him keep his dignity instead of firing him herself, but sadly Joe doesn't have much dignity left. He seems to have lost his mind, blaming Israel for his wife's death when he knows Islamic terrorists killed his wife. As I said before, everyone knows all of the IC leaks come out of the office of the DNI. The place is swarming, she said. Now, this stuff is, we have to see how this unfolds, how the story unfolds and what's really going on here. But the timing of this is just naturally far, far, far too coincidental. I think you would all agree. Mark Levin said, what did Tucker Carlson know and when did he know it? Hey Tucker, can we see those texts with the Iranian regime? This could be one of the greatest scandals in history, texting with the enemy. And who gave you a heads up that our government had seen them? I'm just asking questions. By the way, guys, before I continue, if you haven't already, please do hit the subscribe button on our channel, like our videos, comment, hype our videos. All these things really help us to get into the algorithm and grow the channel and spread the words. Thank you so much for doing that. Dave Rubin said, here's my guess, and I look forward to the internet calling me on this one way or the other. He's been caught as a leaker and knows it, so he resigned to get ahead of the story and then decided to join the Tucker Candice Looney Hour to mobilize the Trump-hating clones in his favor. Now we wait and see. Precisely. Nick Mattel said, and there it is. The investigations predate his resignation. Joe Kent was under fire, so he's trying to get ahead of it by appealing to morons. So this really is, as I say, it's one of the things that I find amazing in our times is that actually truth and falsehood is becoming clearer to spot, clearer than ever before, because of the internet, because of our ability to just get information more quickly. And that's something we should be grateful for. Dave Rubin pointed out here as well, in the end, we all have to choose who to believe. You can either believe Trump, Rubio, Hegseth, and the director of the CIA, or you can believe the guy who just booked himself on Candace and Tucker. Your call. This is the CIA director, John Ratcliffe, saying Joe Kent was completely wrong to say Iran did not pose an imminent threat.
The head of the National Counterterrorism Center resigned, saying that Iran did not represent an imminent threat to the United States. Is there anything to indicate that Iran had ceased in its nuclear ambitions or in its desire to continue to build ballistic missiles capable of threatening American troops and allies in the Middle East?
Senator, no. In fact, the intelligence reflects the contrary.
So you disagree with Mr. Kent?
I do.
I would think any fair-minded assessment of the situation, even based on open sources, would reflect the danger the regime poses to the United States. The head of the...
So, I mean, there you go. There you go. And Mark Levin also pointing out that he said he knows for a fact Kent leaked to Tucker Carlson a meeting that the president had with me, he said, at the president's request, which Tucker Carlson in turn used on the internet. No president should be treated like that. Apparently there were more. Not good. And the appalling anti-Semitism in Kent's public letter deserves judgment, which is why so many of all faiths are condemning it. So there you go. It really is that simple. People like to, glorify this moment and say, look, you see, this is actually Iraq War 2.0, faulty intelligence, and this guy is the whistleblower. Well, it turns out that actually it's the other way around. He is giving the public faulty intelligence and seemingly is doing it because of not such kosher motives, shall we say. Now, before we finish this broadcast, I have to tell you that we've just dropped a new documentary on JTV Plus, which is so important. Have you ever heard anyone say to you, I'm not against Jews or Judaism, it's just Israel and Zionism? They create this distinction, this separation. Well, that separation is complete nonsense. Have a watch of our new documentary, Zionism and Judaism, The False Separation. I'll play you the trailer for it, and if you want to watch the full thing, you can click the link below right now in the video description. I'm not against Judaism, I'm just against Zionism.
It's not Jewish, it's Zionism.
Yeah. Judaism and Zionism are completely separate.
Judaism is a faith, Israel is a state.
You can be Jewish without being a Zionist.
Zionism and Judaism is totally diametrically opposed.
I'm sure you've heard this before, from protesters, from politicians, from even well-meaning people trying to navigate the Israel-Palestine debate. But I'm here to tell you that this separation is complete nonsense. It's a comfortable lie. The kind of lie that sounds intelligent but collapses the moment you actually open this book, the Torah, the Bible, and study Judaism on its own terms. In this JTV Plus documentary, we're going to tackle this myth head on. We'll actually look inside the Torah and see how in the very first book, Genesis, there's no mention of law or religion. It's all centered on the promise of a specific land to a specific nation. We'll trace how Judaism, not modern politics, but Judaism itself, is structured around one obsessive, relentless, undeniable claim: the land of Israel belongs to the Jews. We'll reveal why the building of a nation in the land of Israel is an indispensable part of the project of Judaism, why Judaism is not a religion religion, it's the divine project of a nation in a land. We'll discover how the Torah preemptively answered the colonization accusation that wouldn't fully materialize for another 3,000 years. We'll explore why, if the land is so central, Jews had to spend thousands of years in global exile. We'll unpack what Zionism actually means, and how anti-Zionism doesn't just contradict Israeli policy, it contradicts the fundamental architecture of Judaism itself. For some people, this is going to be uncomfortable viewing, but by the end, we'll prove beyond any reasonable doubt that Judaism and Zionism are inseparable. To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description.